Hello and welcome to The Print. Very rarely does it happen that the books on medicine go beyond the subject and make an emotional connect with the readers. The Liver Doctor, Stories of Love, Loss and Regeneration, the debut book of Dr. Abby Phillips, bucks this trend. It moves between hospital rooms, ancient mythology, between clinical data and personal memory. The book tells the story of the liver, the body's most underrated organ and the only one that can heal and regenerate on its own. It draws from Dr. Phillips's own experiences as a hepatologist and looks at what doctors really know, what they don't know, what they can and what they can't do. It tells more about what happens in these spaces. Dr. Phillips is here today to talk to us about his debut book, The Liver Doctor, and what inspired him to write the book and more. Dr. Abby Phillips, welcome to The Print.
Thank you, Sneha, for having me on this conversation.
So I'd like to begin the conversation by asking you. You began the book writing that I did not become a doctor to help the people cheat death, but to help them understand it. That's what you write. So was that always how you felt, or did the years of practice bring this thought to you?
No, absolutely not. Because, I mean, from the time I joined my MBBS to the time I did my internal medicine and thereafter my subspecialty in hepatology, there is something that they don't really teach you when it comes to, real world medical practice. And that is about people dying. Patients die. And there is a lot that you can actually do to help people from, therapeutics point of view, from diagnostic point of view. But there are cases where death is even inevitable. It's going to happen unless and until you have a strong backup plan. So for me, in my particular situation, I deal with one of the sickest cohorts of patients, which is basically end-stage liver disease patients, and all of them will require a liver transplantation to survive. And that is like, it's like the bare naked truth out there. But all of them cannot afford, or a lot of them are not eligible for transplantation because of various reasons, personal reasons or because of the disease per se. And that is where I think the real medicine starts. If you teach medicine, I mean, from MBBS to MD to DM, whatever level, and it's all in the books. Medicine is just like math. It's 1+1 is 2. You have a set of symptoms, you have a set of signs, and you have a set of clinical evaluation, diagnostics. It's easy to put one and one together and get to the bottom of differential diagnosis and a final diagnosis. I mean, any doctor can do this. But the whole idea is, how do you manage the patient from then on, knowing well that your diagnosis is done, but your treatment options are limited. I think that is what something. This is exactly what medical colleges don't teach us. So all my life, I mean, from a junior doctor to a junior consultant, I was always looking to save my patients. So that's why they are. That's why they approach you, right? I mean, they have a problem and they have a disease and they need to get out of it. So all this while, the whole action was to save them. And if you ask me, in some way, trying to save a patient is actually quite selfish, because you are thinking about yourself and what you can do best for them, but you're not actually thinking from their perspective. So I wrote this book, and I think those words, that understanding that, doctors are not here to actually cheat death, but to help some of these patients understand what it is to be in their position, and that there is a helping hand and there are people around them who know it. And I think, and I just recently saw this series. I mean, the series is pretty bad. It's called Man on Fire on Netflix, where, and I like the book actually, the original one with Denzel Washington. It's great, but this one is really bad. But in that, the particular character says that a doctor should be trying to solve the patient instead of trying to save the patient. That keeps us focused, and that keeps us on our toes, exactly what we need to do for the patient. And this actually happened during the course of my practice as a doctor. It's nothing that I have read in the books. None of my teachers taught me this, but of course I have seen them. I mean, my professors in master's degree and my professor in in my hepatology degree, I have seen the way they deal with patients, and I can see that they are helpless, patients are helpless, but there is this particular line that connects them, where there is an understanding about how things should be. So that is why made that specific statement that you're not here to cheat death. We are here to understand it.
All right. So the book actually follows a very strong storytelling format. It's a non-fiction, but that aspect of storytelling is very strong, and there's is highly anecdotal in that sense. So you are a researcher and a clinician. Why did you write a book on like book of stories?
So there is a place for research. So I'm a clinical researcher. I have more than 265 peer-reviewed publications still now since the last 8 to 9 years. So research is research because there is a need for it in that particular domain or in that particular area of the subject. But what I am doing here has nothing to do with my research profile, because there is no point in a lot of people doing a lot of research and finding out a lot of things that may not benefit humanity or patients, patient population per se, unless the patients themselves understand it. So the best way to simplify whatever we find or whatever we learn from our patients is to actually talk to them back, also the public, the family, the way they understand it. And I think it's best done through stories. So even though these are a collection of stories about how we diagnose patients and how some of these patients were very difficult to diagnose, and how some of these patients, even though we diagnosed, we could not save them. The story is not about us diagnosing them or them getting saved at the end. The story is about medicine. So I wrote this book not to show that medicine is such a great thing that we can actually do all of this stuff for our patients. No, I wrote this book to make people understand that the clinical medicine that really should be thriving is actually not thriving now. And you can actually see through the stories that medicine is not a child's game, and there is a way and there is a method to it. And I think a lot of doctors, including myself, at some point had lost it, but now it is time to reclaim it. And that is also why this book is completely written from a scientific perspective. There is a lot of evidentiary aspects to what I've written. Even though they are stories, you can actually look at the end of the book. There is a QR code, and if you just look at the QR code, you can see more than 500 citations in the whole book, which are based on. So all of these stories per se are actually based on real clinical evidences of diagnosis and management. So it's, yes, stories were told because it's the best way to make people understand science. And I think, and telling stories has always been a big part of my practice itself.
So moving on, you were saying that why it's important to convey these stories in a very people friendly and reader friendly formats. I think that's what you started doing on Twitter. We'll have questions on your Twitter and your Twitter journey, and what followed, and everything that our viewers might be interested in. But I would also like to know, like, if you'd like to share some with our viewers some of the patient stories, some of the top stories that you remember, and remember as some of the stories that were very hard to write for you, and why were they so?
So I think every story is hard to write, and these are not just the ones that I've had the opportunity to treat. There are a lot more patients. I can actually write probably 10 or 20 books like this. But the ones that feature here are mostly, some of them you may understand or realize that it's from my own Twitter feed. So I used to write short stories on Twitter, with respect to my patient diagnosis, and that is how this book came to be in the first place.
Hmm.
Some of the stories, especially, I mean, the one that starts the book with, I think I would say that is the origin story. And that was the first of the cases where a 14-year-old was identified with severe alcohol related liver damage, which is the first time I am, you know, I mean, I've not even read in the books. I'm seeing a patient right in front of me who's just 14 years of age, school-going girl with severe alcohol-related liver damage, and that was a complete whodunit kind of a situation for me. And that is the book. That is a story that starts off with the book in the prologue, and the other stories follow. So, a young girl with alcohol-related liver damage, another young woman with a liver failure, the cause of which was completely unknown, to three other hospitals. And ultimately, while she was on the verge of death, she was transferred to us. And we did identify the cause of death. I'm not going to give out the spoilers here, because it's the way that the book has been written is not just these stories, but there are a lot of the hepatology related aspects to it, history of medicine, the mythological practices at that time, a lot of documentation on how these diseases were identified in humans at one point. So I think it's a beautiful cinematic read, and that is how I wanted to write it. So this enigmatic disease, ultimately we find the cure, and then we lose the patient. Then there was this particular case where it was not even my department, because we have this, and I call it my shadow department of medicine, because we are all internists, at the inside us we are all internal medicine specialists, and we just subspecialize in something more than that. So I've gone through my general medicine training, and then I have become a hepatologist, but then deep inside I'm still a general medicine specialist. So because we have the whole idea about patients from a general medicine point of view also, sometimes we are given the opportunity to diagnose patients where other departments are unable to. So there is something additional my department does on the side, and I just love it, because it's purely like Sherlock Holmes kind of work that we do, me and my team. And I must say that my team members, Dr. Tarun is my senior in charge of inpatient hepatology. Dr. Rajesh is my interventional radiologist who does all the marvelous procedures on these patients when they are in a really difficult situation. We have our transplant surgeon, Dr. Biju, and there are a lot of these people who are completely supportive of me in the unit. And without them, none of this is possible. So we have these patients who come to us who are not even liver disease patients, but they have these strange illnesses that nobody can decode, and then we take them up and then we diagnose them, and some of them we do transfer to other departments for definitive care. Some of them die under us. So there was this particular patient who had, we call it as ascites, which is fluid buildup inside the abdomen. Usually it's seen in cirrhosis, where patients have liver failure, they have fluid buildup in the abdomen. It's not as ascites. And there was this patient with ascites. The ascites reason was never found out. So there was some hint that it could be liver disease, and she was shuttled to my unit, and we worked her up. And ultimately, we found out that it was a completely different disease altogether. And it was supposedly, I think it was the third time this disease was being recorded in the history of medicine. And we diagnosed that, and but then sadly it was not a good disease to be diagnosed with, and we lost the patient. So I think the book also ends with this particular story. So I think these are the stories that stay with us, the ones who were actually given complete responsibility. The patients are helpless, the family is helpless, the doctors who saw them, a couple of doctors, few hospitals who saw them were so helpless, and then they are coming to us, and then we go into a separate mode of clinical medicine. And that is that particular mode that I wanted people to understand, because clinical medicine is always rewarding. It is for the patient, for the family. And I think there is a lot of these controversies happening all around with respect to healthcare and medical practice, which I wanted to directly convey to patients and families and people who read this book, that medicine is still the same. And I think people should just come back and reclaim the way it was before. And that is exactly what these stories also tell us.
There's one more interesting question that you raise in the book, which is about how much certainty medicine should promise and where treatments become harmful. Also, how do doctors actually, live with the decisions that they cannot undo? So, can you tell us what inspired these thoughts? Because very interesting idea to think of how certain a doctor is of a treatment.
So this is something I even tell my colleagues, that the biggest business in hospitals is death. Dying is
Yeah.
the biggest business in hospitals, not birth. Birth is very cheap, it's easy to be done and get it done with. But dying is a big business, and these are the kind of patients that hospitals really thrive on. And these are exactly the patients I care for. So cirrhosis patients, they go through hell, through various stages of the disease. They are with me for at least 10 to 12 years from the initial diagnosis, and then at least another 3 or 4 years when they go through hell. And ultimately, either they die or they go for a transplant, or in between, something even worse, like a liver cancer comes up, and that makes the equation even more complex. So these are the kind of patients who are sticking with you for a very long time. They are under your care for decades, right? And A doctor would love that. You can just squeeze these patients out from any point of view, from diagnostic point of view, from treatment point of view, whatever it is. But ultimately, they have to pay the big price when it comes to even transplant, because ultimate treatment is the most expensive. So what I do and what I always want to do for my patients is that I need to know my limits first. So if there is a patient who has stable liver disease, I just manage the liver disease for that particular stage and for the risk factors that has caused the liver disease. So it's pretty much very easy to manage those patients, and it's just surveillance. Then there are these patients who require medical management because complications come up. And most of these complications can be managed medically. And that is an additional cost, but then that also is tailored to the complications. So patients are okay with affording those additional costs for long term. Then there are this group of patients whose complications cannot be managed medically at all. They keep coming to hospitals, they keep getting admitted. So that those are the patients where we need to look at definitive care. So that comes, for me, it comes out as a liver transplant. So the first question is, are you willing for a liver transplant? Are you ready? So most of them will say, 95% of my patients will say, no, we are not ready because we don't have money, we don't have a donor, and there are a lot of things, because they have been getting treated for almost 8 to 9 years for the same disease. Their money is all out. They won't get an insurance because nobody is going to give them insurance because they already have pre-existing liver disease. So we are in a fix. So for those patients, I know my limits are to make their quality of life better. I'm not going to save them, because I can't save them. The disease is going to take them away at some point. And I know this. I slow and steady convey this to the family first and then to the patient, make them understand that what we are going to do is to make sure that your hospital visits are going to be lesser. Your finances on your medical management of complications is going to be lesser. But ultimately, the person is going to die. But then we have to give the dignity to that person in death. And that is where I think this is very important. So without knowing limits, it's easy to take patients for a ride. And I think a lot of these doctors do it on knee-jerk responses, because patients keep coming to them with same problems, different problems. The same patient, and they don't know what to do, and they just throw everything at them, right? And that is when costs increase, hospitalization increases, patients go through very bad phases and ultimately die. And the doctor feels that he's done everything for that patient, but then ultimately you have actually done nothing. You have taken everything from the patient, even in death. So I think this realization is so important, and it depends on each and every doctor and each and every disease that the person treats. There are diseases where you need to say, okay, it's time, and there are diseases where you can fight on. So I think this realization has to happen, and it can only happen if you are practicing ethical medicine.
I would want to now come to the most interesting part of the conversation about your Twitter account and about your how you discovered Twitter and social media. So you've written in the book about your story of how your journey on Twitter started and how you started with writing patient-centric stories and then you gained a following. Can you tell our viewers who might be very interested in knowing about your discovery of the platform, your online experiences there, both the good and the bad? I'm sure you have had a lot of both.
uh, it's good and bad both. I'm not
Yeah.
denying the good part. There is a lot of good out there. So initially for me, social media was just something to connect with family and friends, and I remember from Orkut time onwards. But then Twitter was something that it was most of the time in the news. So a lot of these news channels would actually cite things from Twitter. So Twitter was the place where they actually got a lot of information from. So I said, okay, let me join Twitter and see what is happening. And initially, not the Twitter now, that original Twitter when we had the Bluebird, not the
Mm.
X. And at that time, I could see these tick marks, and I was wondering what those tick marks were. And those were special people who are, given the authority out there, talking about politics, talking about medicine, healthcare. And I said, this is great, because there are actual experts here talking about real good stuff. And I want to become like them on social media, because I am a doctor. I have a lot of things to tell people. I do a lot of research and everything, and so it went on. So I initially used my proper name, which is Abby Phillips, and made a account there and started talking about general things about not just liver disease, but commenting on others' posts regarding my experiences with the patients that they were discussing, etc. And initially, I started talking about alternative medicine. So that was the time when I was starting my work on herbal and herbal related liver injuries. That is in 2015, 2016, 2017 time. And I started publishing, and I wanted people to know that, there is something on the side happening that which nobody's talking about. So let me talk about it. So the initial response was horrible, because that was the first time I learned a lot of bad words. The internet lingo of a lot of bad words. The first time I came to know that there is something known as rice bag, and that is from Twitter. Thank you. And that was a term that was given for Christians, and I did not know why, because I then went and checked on the net and said that it was because Christians were converted by giving them, Hindus were converted to Christianity by giving them a rice bag, and that's actually a bad word to say for Christians. And so on and so forth. They just started abusing me right, left, and center, because I was talking about Ayurveda. So I was wondering, why is it such a big deal? I'm talking about herbal liver injuries, and there is this alternative medicine practice which people need to know about, that it's not always safe. So I figured out that there is no way to actually put this into people's heads. So I backed off. I did a lot more of my research works. I published guidelines. I became part of guidelines, and it went on and went on. And we had so much more data, including data on your herbal and dietary supplements also, not just alternative medicine like Herbalife. So I think that was the turning point on Twitter, where I spoke about this particular patient who was on a herbal and dietary supplement, and how she died, and how this was linked to Herbalife. And Herbalife came at me so badly, because Twitter was the place where you actually get a lot of um, exposure to people from all over. So there was this professor from the US, another professor from the Europe. They were all talking about it, because it seems Herbalife related liver injury is quite rare. And when I published that study, and ultimately the journal removed it because of legal hustles from the manufacturer, I talk about that also. And that was my first viral tweet, actually. That Herbalife one, and telling people that my paper was. I was so depressed and sad at the time, because as a clinician and researcher, getting a paper removed is like, it's a very sad thing, because you work so much on it. And I saw that there are people supportive of, and Elizabeth Bick is a medical medicine integrity specialist. She wrote about it and all that. And I understood that there is a way that we need to convey matter on social media, and that is how I started talking straight on. There is no sugarcoating in any stuff that I say online. Personally, I'm not at all like that. People think that I'm a very I'm a barbarian when it comes to dealing with me, but I'm not like that at all. But there is a way on social media. I need to do that, because otherwise the message gets diluted with a lot of these trolling and comments. So that is how I changed myself to the liver doctor, and started talking from my patient's perspective, my experience perspective, and my expertise perspective, all blended in. And that actually worked. And that is how at one point, I have the largest medical Twitter account in India.
That's right. I also want to know, because you said that you moved your approach towards a more specialist centric, writing on Twitter. I wanted to ask you about the misinformation landscape also, because I'm sure you come across a lot of information that is not correct from verified accounts, as you said. What do you? I mean, on your daily, space on Twitter, that you spend a lot of time on Twitter. What kind of misinformation do you come across on a regular basis?
So, so one thing is that I don't go looking for misinformation. People think that I start fights, and I love e-lafadas, but I don't at all. So a lot of these misinformation is what people actually send me. So a lot of my followers, they actually send me clippings or posts which they feel that I should talk about. And that is how all these big accounts come into the picture. So there was, multiple ones. There are a lot of these celebrities and sports people, other influencers who provide or promote brands or products or practices, or their own personal experiences with respect to certain healthcare or medical aspects, which is complete nonsense. And as a doctor, it's very important that I tell the right point of view from that particular topic that they are on. So that is how I started off dealing with misinformation. So it's impossible to fight misinformation from a straight on perspective, because it's always thriving, right? Misinformation is always one step ahead of true information. and it's not easy to fight misinformation. But whatever I can find which has a huge impact, for example, Sidhu, the cricketer Sidhu, talking about his wife's cancer and putting all of that on natural cures and things like that, or some of these actors and actresses trying to sell herbal teas, saying that it's good for your diabetes, or people talking about things. It matters because they have huge followings and huge subscribers, and it's important that somebody like me step it up and clarify it. So that's when all this fight happens. It's not a fight, actually, it's just teaching. People think it's a fight, but only because it's a fight mode, people are concentrating and focusing on it. So if I'm just one simple guy sitting in one corner saying that these people are all wrong and this is the right thing, nobody's going to listen to me. So I have to take it head on, and I have to be harsh because there is no other way. And I think that's why we have a book also now.
The fact that you are the most published researcher in the world on Ayush related liver damage, what is that one thing from that research that you think that people genuinely should know?
So I think it's not just one thing. I think I can say three things here. One is that, and I'm very vocal about it. One is that a career in Ayush is considered a career in healthcare in India, and that is because of decades of indoctrination and understanding from generation to generation that there is something there, but there is nothing there. If you look at all the scientifically progressive societies, they don't spend public money on colleges to teach alternative medicine. So that is one major point I understood, that you might be practicing alternative medicine in the most ethical way that you can, but even then it's not ethical, because it's not medicine. So that is one thing I wanted to convey, that there are no actual benefits known in this particular whatever alternative medicine it is, in Ayush. But then there are these documented harms coming up, and it's not just one time, two time, it's like multiple times of adverse events getting notified, getting documented, published, not just from my center but from centers across India and also out of India. So we have a case for true harm and a case for no benefit. So why should people actually practice something without any benefit, which has no benefit but which can harm? And why should patients go for a practice or opt for a healthcare which has no benefit but which can actually harm? So that is something that I wanted to convey through this. And because I see a lot of patients who are on Ayurveda related liver injuries and all that, and I'm biased here because that is the largest number of patients that come to me. It's because most of them are referred to me also. I'm sure there are other alternative medicine practices that can be equally harmful, and there are other people documenting it. But this is something that I always tell people, that just because it is promoted by the government or approved by the government doesn't mean that it is actually going to be useful or safe for you. And this is exactly why that research is very important.
All right. So you also, because of your very vocal and public image about your criticism of Ayurveda, you have got a lot of people calling you anti-tradition, anti-culture. How do you respond to these comments?
Just ignore it. Initially I used to be very triggered, but now I'm not. So I look at myself as the Kung Fu Panda series of evolution. So initially I was Kung Fu Panda. So I learned to be Master Shifu at some point, talking about taking on the battles which I really want to battle. And now I'm completely Ugui. I'm completely at peace with myself, because whatever you say and do, whatever you try to educate, there is a group of people who will never want to understand. And there will be a lot of these criticisms because, one, you are going against beliefs with data. So data is king, right? You have evidence or you don't have evidence. We have evidence. We are generating evidence. And this evidence directly cuts through a lot of dogmas, a lot of beliefs that people have been having regarding healthcare and medicine all their lives. So obviously they will get completely flustered. And I think it's important that you need to create this chaos and confusion, because only then clarity comes from it. Right. So a lot of people who initially used to abuse me in 2016 are my good followers and friends now in 2026, because they have slowly understood that the things that I spoke about at the time are the same things I speak about even now. I have not changed my stance. I have actually generated more evidence and data on that matter. So there are people who change, but there are the ones who don't change. They call me. Oh, by the way, there was a person who actually said that I was from China because I gave an interview to South China Morning Post. I became a Chinese agent. I mean, that's how the level of conspiracies go there. So I don't bother about these anymore because there is no need to. We just keep talking about science and the scientific method and what scientific discoveries are doing to help improve people's lives, and I think that's about it. Consistency is key here.
So, Dr. Abhi, government is also promoting and spending and investing a lot of money in, promoting traditional medicine. Uh, I heard that you've also, because of some of your work that got published, got a legal notice or something. This can be like the question can be out of the scope of the interview, but just for my curiosity, would like to know what sort of retaliation have you faced in this context?
So, I mean, I write about this in the book also. There is a chapter on it where I speak about all the types of retaliation that I have received for talking about, realistic practices in healthcare, for talking against adverse events of alternative medicine, and basically telling people the truth about what actually benefits them and what does not. So it starts with getting FIRs. So I have had police officers coming from Uttar Pradesh, Raebareli station, to Kochi to question me on a particular post I made on homeopathy, when homeopathy has nothing to do with Indian tradition. It's just hanging there as an etch at the end of the Ayush, and people consider that as traditional Indian care. I don't know why. So I made a post about homeopathy being quackery and homeopathic practice being fraud, and some homeopathy guy who has some contacts with the central government in UP sent the whole police force on me, and they filed an FIR against me there. But then ultimately they decided to drop it because I did not receive any ongoing proceedings or any other letters from them after that. But a cop actually came here to speak with me on that, to take my statements. Then police officers have come from Trivandrum, the capital state here, regarding certain Ayurvedic products where I published that they contain very high amounts of arsenic and can be harmful. And that was actually a peer-reviewed scientific publication. So that guy actually gave an FIR, a criminal defamation against me on a peer-reviewed scientific publication. And from then onwards, it's just a lot of legal battles. Some of the legal battles I'm not even supposed to talk about because I'm gagged from mentioning their names. But there are criminal cases, there are civil cases, there are police cases, and other court cases that are ongoing across the country. I have a lawyer team in almost every city now. Biggest group is in Kerala only. But I do have lawyer teams in Bangalore, in Mumbai, in Delhi. They're all stationed there for helping me. And thanks to them, a lot of them are working pro bono because they love what I do, and I am very thankful to them. And because of that, I've had I could fight with these frivolous cases. But apart from that, I've had physical assaults on my lab members where we actually analyze these alternative products for adulterants and contaminants, etc. We had a lab here in Kochi, and somehow the address of that lab leaked. I don't know from where. I think from one of the cases or something. And a group of homeopathy practitioners traveled all the way from North Kerala and came to this lab and started manhandling my lab members. And after which they had to shut the lab down, and they moved to another lab, and I moved to another lab completely, out of Kerala. So we did our rest of the work with respect to chemical analysis and all that in another lab. So all of this has happened, and this is not because I'm just giving you opinions. This is because I'm publishing peer-reviewed scientific studies on alternative medicine. So these are all the stuff that I have faced, I keep facing, and I'm sure I'll be also facing in the future when it comes to talking about alternative medicine practices.
All right, this brings me to the last question. Back to the book about someone reading this book knows nothing about you. What do you hope they take from it?
So, if they know nothing about me, I think it's the best thing about the book, because this book is not about me, right? This book is about what clinical medicine truly is. And at the heart of medicine lies humanity. So, I was born a Christian. I was raised a Christian, not my choice, not my option, but I was indoctrinated throughout my life to believe in something. But when I started the study of medicine, and I write about this in the book also, there was this point where I figured out that it's not about religion or creed or gender or anything. It's about people helping other people. That's what matters. And I think the whole book is an ode to that. And I think from a doctor's point of view, people take it for granted that doctors are going to help you, but the current situation is not so. I mean, it's quite bad the way that medicine is now seen as a business. You can actually see that a lot of the hospitals that are run in India now are under private equity, and they just look at profits. So the way the medicine is turning, the practice of medicine is being turned. I mean, I don't like it at all. So I think this book would serve as an oasis for people who think that medicine is all bad and the practice and healthcare aspects into the future is going to be really worse. I hope not, because there are stories like this, there are practitioners like these who would help upkeep what clinical medicine truly wants to preserve. And I think that is humanity. So this book is an ode to humanity and an ode to my patients who help me understand that humanity and humanism is the best form of service that one can offer in their lifetime.
All right. I think these are all the questions we had for you. Thank you so much for joining Dr. Abby Phillips in this conversation. It was lovely talking to you.
Thank
Thanks
you.
for
Thank you.
watching.
Thank you. Thank you for having me here.